Hello.
Oh, well, look who it is.
Well.
How you doing?
I'm pretty high right now.
Like,
Marijuana.
oh, okay. I don't remember that.
But you talk like super fast and you're pretty well informed, so I guess I have a little bit of an anxiety about being able to keep up.
Oh,
but
we're just like talking about what happened, right? We're not like going to be debating, right? We're just covering the debate.
No. I'm not anticipating a debate, but I'm just saying, just simply being able to follow the conversation. I guess I have some concerns.
Oh, I can slow down. When I smoke, I don't know what your experience is like, but when I smoke, I literally, as I'm talking, I forget the first part of the sentence, like 7 words in, and I just like keep going. It's like really horrible. I don't know how you can function when you're high.
Sometimes that's the case for me, but here, let me just lead. So like, yeah. I think Elizabeth Warren had probably the best night.
I
think Bernie probably had the second best night. I think I think probably Mayor Pete after that, then Biden, then Amy, then Bloomberg. That would be my rank. But I heard somebody in my chat was saying that you thought that Pete was having a good night.
I thought that Pete did decently. I think he was more aggressive tonight than he ever has been before. I think one of Pete's problems is he comes off as like very soft-spoken and robotic. He still kind of comes off as robotic, but he was definitely more aggressive tonight than he ever has been, which is something I didn't think he could even do. Like, I thought Amy was going to cry. Yeah, go ahead.
Wait, like, you didn't think... I feel like there was like 4 or 5 separate instances where Bernie just talked over Pete and then Pete backed down and like let him...
I don't know if I'd say he backed down, but Bernie was also tonight way more aggressive than I've ever seen him before, which is really good as well. If you were to say that Bernie had like a really good performance, I would say it's for that reason. Bernie's usually way more passive on stage, and tonight it felt like he was actually like way more like cutting people off and shit, and like going hard with the things that he believed in, which was good. Yeah.
And what else were you were continuing on? You were talking about Amy.
Yeah, I don't know. I was not impressed with Amy's performance tonight. For once, usually she gives good answers, but like there were a few times when she was talking like at Pete, I thought she was going to start crying. Like when she was like, "Are you calling me stupid?" Honest to God, I really think. Well, I always say this, but none of it is ever fucking true. But like the Mexican president one, that almost felt like a Sarah Palin moment to me for Amy. I can't believe she didn't know that. That like
did you know the president of Mexico off the top of your head before that?
I don't, but I don't work on the committee that does trade deals, and I don't have like decades of whatever experience in fucking Congress. like
which committee does she serve on?
Well, Pete called her out on it. She serves on like one of the ones in charge of immigration or whatever. Like that's okay. Yeah, that's really rough.
Well, I was gonna say, as far as Amy goes, there were 2 times that I thought that she got a shit deal. And one of those times was this particular instance where she had forgotten the name of the Mexican president or couldn't name him in an interview that happened maybe 5 days ago, 4 days ago.
And she was going on. It was on Telemundo. Like, come on, dude. Like, yeah, but go ahead.
Okay. The more that we talk about it, the more I think it's bad. But I also acknowledge that when anyone, I don't care who they are in a really high pressure situation and adrenaline is pumping and maybe you're thinking about some other shit that's going on at the same time on top of like all this pressure, I can see somebody like I would be able to buy that she did know the name, but she couldn't think of it in that moment because she was having like...
I would stake my life and the life of my 8-year-old kid on her that she didn't know his name. She legitimately just didn't know his name. That's what happened there. Like you don't just like if you would have asked her, and I would bet my life and the life of my kid on this too. If you would have asked her who's the Prime Minister of Canada, she would have said Trudeau instantly. She would have known it instantly.
The other one that I was going to say that I think she got a bad rap, like when she. A lot of people in my chat were kind of giving her shit for her answer about DACA, and she said, "What's the best solution to DACA?"
Oh yeah,
and she said, "Beating Donald Trump." I absolutely agreed with her.
Yeah, but that wasn't what they were looking for. Well, firstly, that's not even true, and then secondly, like they were looking for like, well, what policy? What would you do about the DACA kids? Right?
Well, what do you mean it's not true? She could just sign an executive order. She could just do that day one.
Executive order is like a pretty shit way to deal with this, right? We've seen that because
but it's an immediate solution to the problem, though. She could, like, the next president could just
Sure, but I feel like that should have been her response then. It should have been like, oh yeah, like I would re-sign DACA day one, executive action DACA, like immediately. I think that would have been a better answer than just like beating Trump is how we would fix DACA, right?
Okay. Yeah.
It just sounded like I'm not saying that her answer is like technically wrong. I mean, I guess like if you're talking about like executive order, then that is true. Beating Trump is like the way to do it, but like it sounded like a really weird response. Like she was like pivoting like really hard. That's what it sounded like, even if like maybe technically the answer was true. But
well, I would agree that she had in terms of delivery, just a really terrible night.
Yeah, for sure.
What about Bloomberg though? Holy fuck, man.
So it's really funny. We were talking about this a couple days ago. Everybody was like, because everybody is so conspiratorial, saying that like, oh, the DNC is shilling hard, bringing Bloomberg in, changing the rules. So what I said this on stream and I'd heard this a couple weeks ago, was that Bernie's campaign and Warren's campaign, that they were actually pushing for the DNC to change these rules as well, saying that Bloomberg staying out of these debates was actually helping him a lot because nobody could really form very many negative opinions about him. Now I don't know if there were like primary sources of this, or if that ended up being like 100% true, but the debate performance tonight was, he's not a politician. He can't answer these questions. Like, oh my God,
not
it was
on the
so
national
bad.
stage, not like
No.
that.
Maybe for New York it's okay because of the type of character he is, but when he's saying things like America needs a manager, like, what are you doing, dude? Yeah. What are you doing? What the fuck is wrong?
It was crazy because I was telling my chat before leading up to the debate. I said tonight's going to be really important. It's the first time we're seeing Bloomberg. He's incredibly surging, so he has to have like a really good night. And just to see every single candidate on the stage in the first question, they led with just shitting on Bloomberg, and I felt like that set the tone for like the next I thought that's why I think Elizabeth Warren had the best night.
Oh, because of her attack. Dude, okay, so two parts to this. One, Bernie hardcore bailed Bloomberg out when Elizabeth Warren had Bloomberg on the ropes with these NDAs, and Bloomberg is saying this dumb shit like, listen, I said some jokes and some women were mad at him. I'm fucking sorry. And then Bernie came in out of nowhere, and Bernie was like, well, what about your stance on minimum wage? Dude, Bloomberg got bailed out. Sorry, that line of questioning was like destroying him. I couldn't believe that Bernie came in and just didn't let Warren like fucking finish him.
He had already done all the damage you could possibly
Dude, I don't know. Every time Bloomberg opened his mouth on it, he was just digging deeper and deeper. It was so fucking horrible. Holy shit.
And his line, particularly when he said they consensually signed.
Oh, yeah.
That was so
It felt like a South Park skit. It sounded like a South Park skit. Like, they consented to the oral agreements that we made. Like, I don't think Bloomberg could have drafted up a worse answer to some of these questions.
That was literally the worst answer he could have given. That's such a loaded term in the broader context of that discussion, consent, and for him to invoke it in the context of an NDA.
Oh my God, dude.
Oh my God. As soon as I saw that, I'm like, oh my God.
Yeah.
Like, I thought that tonight was going to go bad for him. I don't think I wasn't expecting it to go that bad. Like, that was like, I felt like a pretty. So, what did you think of Biden? We haven't talked about him very much.
I think Biden is. He's just kind of there until he fades away. I don't think he had a particularly horrible performance, but it wasn't very good. And it feels like it feels to me, this is just a feeling that like he's lost like so much momentum. Like two horrendous losses in Iowa and New Hampshire. Like, fuck, like I don't know, just it feels like he needs like a fucking blow away he needs to come out as a star to have like a debate performance that'll like turn people's minds. I think
he needed to have a night like Warren did. I think. I mean,
maybe,
do you agree that she had the best night, or who would you say did the best?
I mean, her attacks on Bloomberg were really, really good. In terms of like just representing herself, I think she did pretty good. Yeah. Best night, I think Elizabeth Warren had a pretty good night. Yeah, for sure. Top two at least. I think Pete did like some impressive things as well, but like, yeah, I would definitely put her up there. Well, Bernie and Warren both had pretty good nights, I'd say.
So the question becomes how much. I mean, when I look at RCP's aggregate right now, Sanders has a pretty dominant lead in Nevada. It's like 30% of the electorate, and then Biden is second place with 16%. So Sanders is plus 14 in the aggregate. So did she do so well tonight that it's going to actually hurt?
I don't think it's going to help her at
Yeah,
all.
probably
You might
not.
see in national polling as well, you might see Biden gain a lot here, and that be really confusing. But Bloomberg has been eating into Biden's like voter base quite a bit, so it's possible that
and Klobuchar.
yeah, a little, yeah.
And Klobuchar.
It's possible that when Bloomberg like dies here on stage, that like people like Biden pick up a lot of those voters, they get them back again. You know, even though Bloomberg was rising a lot in the national polls, a lot of the people that were supporting him like had the weakest feelings about him. It's not like they were like ride or die Bloomberg supporters. It was just he had name recognition because he was like advertising in states that a lot of these people weren't really campaigning in that much yet.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Biden is an interesting, not Biden, but Bloomberg is.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know what he was
I
thinking.
thought that was going to go, but I mean, like if you were a Bloomberg fan, right? Because he's gained pretty substantially in the national polls in a lot of these really crucial states. He's like surging everywhere.
Yeah, well, again, that's just because
but
he's
if you
campaigning.
ask somebody who is like supporting him what they thought was his strongest moment in tonight's debate, it's like, did he have a strong moment? Like, what was like everything? Like when he went after Bernie about communism, I thought Bernie countered that really well.
Well, that was just a weak. That was just dumb. But man, Bloomberg tried that whole like, wow, a communist has like $1 million house. Like you must be doing pretty good. Like that was like a huge boomer attack. Maybe that plays well with older audiences. I just don't know because I'm like really out of touch with like the actual boomers. Like maybe
definitely does.
Yeah, maybe it did. There was like one answer that Bloomberg gave that I thought was like pretty good. I think it had to do with like climate change, but like he wasn't like attacking anyone else or doing anything.
Yeah, I remember. Yeah.
It was like, yeah, that's a pretty good answer. I think it had to do with like fracking or like transitioning off of fossil fuels, but it wasn't like it wasn't like a standout answer that attacked anybody else or did anything to ease the attacks on him. So I don't think that matters that much.
So I wanted to get your opinion on what you think would happen with a broker convention. I've heard a lot of people talk about how the establishment Dems would basically do anything to block Bernie's nomination, but if we were in a broker convention situation and the DNC, first of all, I have a couple questions for you. Maybe you can answer that for me. What role does the DNC play in a broker convention? Like how do they operate within that structure?
This is like a really complicated question. The broader question is like, what role does the Democratic Party, who does the DNC have its obligations to? Because some people would say, oh, well, to the voters. But then other people would say, well, the Democratic Party has like a responsibility to the Democratic Party, you know? So when it comes to like a brokered convention and you've got superdelegates voting and everything, like let's say that so a lot of this is hypothetical, okay? But let's say since Bernie is like an independent person and he doesn't really see like a big future with the Democratic Party and he hasn't been very allegiant to the Democratic Party, does the DNC have an obligation to the new voters that Bernie has brought along to vote in a way that they could view as being destructive to the party? I don't know what the correct answer is to that. You know, I mean, the obvious answer is I'd say, well, I would expect them to represent the Democratic Party more and probably choose somebody that's not like anti-Democratic Party. Like Bernie has kind of sort of come off in the past. But then on another hand, of course, you've got the idea that like if you vote in that way, you basically say fuck you to a plurality of the vote, and then they don't come along with you for the general, and then, oh, well, now you've kind of fucked the Democratic Party as well because there you go, now you lost the general election. That's a really hard one. I mean, you have to balance out like the longevity of your political party while also not disparaging the voters that are voting in your primaries, right?
But what do you know about what role specifically? Let's say you're a DNC staffer. What are you doing at the convention? Because when I see the conversation play out on social media, oftentimes I see it framed as if the DNC itself as a body is literally running around the convention and like whipping votes for a centrist candidate or something like that.
Oh, no. Well, that sounds like Bernie.
Are they not?
That sounds like Bernie fanatics saying. I mean, the thing is they don't have to do that because the majority of the Democratic Party is still like supporting like moderate candidates. Now that might change as we go down the road on this delegate process. If Bernie continues to gain momentum or Warren picks up or the moderate candidates fall off. But like if Bernie goes, let's say hypothetically Bernie goes to the
It's a pretty slim majority though between Bernie and Elizabeth Warren, it's a pretty slim majority.
Yeah, it might be.
You have to think that a lot of those voters that would go for Pete normally or Biden or even Amy or whatever, a lot of them would go for a candidate like Elizabeth Warren or Bernie.
It's possible, yeah. You'll have to see when the votes drop off and what the second choices are and then how much of a plurality Bernie can get. Coming in. It'll matter the delegate counts at the end. Like if we get to a Democratic convention where Bernie and Warren together have like 35% of the delegates, I think it's pretty hard to say that like, well, the DNC should just coalesce around one of these more progressive candidates. But if they walk in there with with Bernie having 45% of the delegates and then Bernie and Warren together having like 60% of the delegates, like, okay, well, do you really want to pick a moderate out of this crowd? Like, is that the correct answer? And then you also have like on a more complicated level.
How likely is it that Warren's going to actually make it to the convention though? Because if she I do think she had a really good night. I don't know how much that's going to help her in some of these upcoming races.
Yeah, like, I don't know. I don't know what her funding looks like.
You have to assume that. I think she understood going into tonight's debate that it was like she needed to perform well, or that was going to be it for her. Because when is Super Tuesday? Is that March 3rd or something like that?
Something like that.
Yeah, she doesn't have much time. So, anyways, what were we gonna say?
It'll be interesting to see what happens if it'll be interesting to see what happens coming into the DNC.
It seems like suicide to me, like self-immolation. Like if the Democratic National Committee prevented someone with a plurality of votes, like Bernie Sanders, if he got 35% or 45% of the vote or whatever, I think that they would do so knowing that it would basically cut their chances down to zero for winning in 2020, because there's no way that a candidate like Buttigieg or Biden is going to win versus Trump with that hanging over their head.
Yeah, for sure. But you can argue just the opposite. Like the moderates would argue the other end as well. That if 70% of the people go into the Democratic convention not supporting somebody as left-leaning as Bernie, and then you give it to him because he has a plurality, and they say, well, fuck you. Like now the general's fucked. Like you're not galvanizing us to go out and vote for somebody like Bernie, right? It's a hard problem. I'm not saying that that's right or wrong. I'm just saying that like you have a very big divide right now in the Democratic Party between like the establishment Dems and the progressives, especially because, and another big problem that you have is that the progressives don't really bring along the black vote as well as the establishment either, because establishment Dems, black voters tend to be more moderate establishment or conservative, which is another problem you have as well. It's a hard one unifying the party around that. I don't know what the right answer is. I really don't. People think that I'm like really anti-Bernie, but I just don't know what the correct answer is there for winning the general. And then also to be clear, I don't know, but I would vote for Bernie 7 trillion times out of 7 trillion times over somebody like fucking Trump in a heartbeat. I don't even think about it. I don't know in the general. It almost feels like in some ways, if you want to be really pessimistic about it, it feels like we're almost fucked going into the general, because there are a lot of people that probably consider Bernie too far left to ever vote for him, and there are a lot of Bernie supporters that just won't support an establishment candidate either. So I don't know.
But we have data though. Like the polling that we have right now indicates clearly that it's going to be a close race. Like every Democratic candidate has a slight edge, it seems, over Donald Trump.
Sure, yeah. Well, now they do, yeah.
Between a neck and neck race like Buttigieg, I think is 47 versus 47. I think is the last time I saw it.
Okay.
And then you have a range of going up to, I think, +6, I think is the highest that it goes. And I think Biden has the highest lead in a head-to-head right now.
That might have changed, but the most recent time I saw that was like a couple months ago. That was before Iowa and New Hampshire. So that might have changed to Bernie having the biggest head-to-head against Trump. But
I don't think so. I whatever. I mean, I saw it on my feed like a couple days ago.
Oh, okay, sure.
What were we talking about again? See, this is what I was saying. I got high before I have no fucking idea what we're talking about right now.
So you were talking about how we can win the general election, and then you said there's polling data on this about like people being able to win against Trump.
Well, I was just saying, like, I think maybe the sentiment of what I was trying to drive home was that I think every Dem candidate on that stage right now has a pretty decent chance of being Donald Trump. It seems like a coin flip.
I don't know about that though. The general is going to be a whole other. That's going to be something else.
It's impossible to predict, but if you just took a snapshot in time right now,
Yeah, well, but like a snapshot in time, that only says what would people do given like right now, right? The snapshot before Iowa, New Hampshire looked very differently than the snapshot now, right? Yeah, it's going to be hard to say after the primary is like done and over with what the general looks like. Like there are some people, in my opinion, that would just never work in the general. Like I like not to be mean, but I don't think Warren or like Amy. Maybe I'm sexist. I don't think that they could ever talk on stage with Trump. I think it would be disastrous. I think Hillary was really tough. I think tougher than either of those, and even she didn't have like a good performance. And I don't know. Warren to me, this sounds so mean. I don't mean to sound like, but Warren sounds like she's always about to cry. And then Amy is just has the charisma of like a smooth rock. I don't know why, but like yeah.
I had the opposite impression tonight.
Really?
I thought that Amy sounded like she was always going to cry.
Really?
Tonight, every time she spoke. And then
well, tonight she did, especially because she actually sounded like Pete was actually bullying the fuck out of Amy. Amy was like, "Are you calling me dumb?" Like,
yeah.
Or she's like, "I wish we." Maybe this plays well with the average American. It's hard to say because I am very disconnected now from like how people view these. But like when Amy was saying to Pete, she's like, "Well, can't we all just be perfect like you?" Like, oh my god, why would you say that? That sounded really. But maybe
you could tell she was super pissed.
Yeah. Maybe most Americans feel that way about Pete because Pete does come off as like part of the intelligentsia. So maybe that looked good for Amy. But I don't know. To me, that looked really petulant. I couldn't believe that she said that. Holy shit.
Just seemed like more platitudes with Pete tonight. Like he's just like he is good at delivery, but you know, what did he say specifically that made you think, oh yeah, he had a good night tonight?
Pete like attacking other people like more viciously, I thought looked good for Pete. It felt like
he went after Amy, but who else did he go after?
Fuck. I used to take notes on all of these.
He was like the mildest attack on Bloomberg at the start. I felt.
Yeah, but I mean, everybody had their share at going on Bloomberg. The attacks on Bloomberg are not very interesting.
He tried to go after Bernie for the cost of healthcare, but I felt like it just didn't. For me, I'm biased as fuck, but for me, it didn't land in the way that maybe he was hoping for. Because it just felt like a super disingenuous attack to talk about spending, $40 trillion on Medicare for all versus 45 on the private insurance company. It just seems like such a stupid argument.
Maybe that I still feel like I still feel like that's going to be a hard sell for the general that nobody agrees with me on, but I don't know. I guess we'll figure out when we get there. I feel like the banning private insurance thing, that's going to keep coming up over and over and over and over again, and that's like a really hard point. I think that like if we were to go like on a nuanced like policy based conversation, Bernie Sanders can defend it, but in terms of rhetoric and attack lines, like the very culinary union in Nevada right now is opposing you because you want to kill their private insurance. That's a really hard one to stand up against. Holy shit. It just plays really bad for you, I think. And Bernie can resist, like, well, yeah, taxes will go up, but the overall fees will go down and blah, blah, blah. But like, I feel like it's a hard sell on that, like rhetorically.
Not just with that, though, because he was able to push back and say that he has the most support when it comes to union organizations at any candidate on that stage. And so on a national scale, I feel like that was a pretty good rebuttal to that situation over there. But like how many people do you know that are super enthusiastic about their insurance company? They're like, I love my insurance company.
This is really weird, but like most Americans actually rate their insurance like pretty highly, which seemed unbelievable to me until I started looking at polling data for it. But most Americans actually rate like their work-based, like people that have like work-based insurance plans and everything, they actually rate it like pretty highly. Like, yeah, I'm happy with my work insurance. Now, some people say things like, well, they're just happy with their doctors. They don't like their insurance, et cetera, et cetera. I've tried to find like more precise polling data about that, but I can't find anything like that. But by all indications, most Americans that have insurance today, especially through work, actually rate their coverage like pretty highly. They're pretty happy with it. Now, obviously, if you're not covered or whatever, you're fucked and you don't like your insurance, or if you've had a really bad experience, you don't. But remember, it's kind of like airlines, like everybody talks about how horrible the airlines are, but the average person doesn't have a horrible experience with like Delta or American Airlines,
I don't know if I've ever heard you talk about it firmly, but what is your ideal healthcare system in the United States?
So my ideal politically possible one is a public option, 100%.
Not politically possible. Your ideal, apart from polls or whatever.
Ideal, I think multi-payer or single payer is okay. I don't have a strong preference between the two. So whether the government is the single payer of all healthcare, or whether or not there's a public option that competes with like a market, I've seen both types of systems across Europe. We've looked at different countries where different types of systems are ran. Some have their pros, some have their cons, but I don't have a strong pull between either one. I'm okay with either. Either would be vastly superior than the shit show we have now.
Okay.
But I feel like the public option is like such an easier sell. The funding you'd have to fight for it initially would be less. The political capital needed would be way less because you don't have to fight over the private insurance, death panel, all that bullshit as much because people have an option to keep their own healthcare if they want, which sounds good to Americans because Americans are, as a people, more anti-government than like Europeans. So yeah, I feel like the political capital needed for healthcare, for a public option is so much less that makes it like preferable.
So like a public option would be everybody sort of paying into like a state-run insurance program, something like that, right?
Yeah, you'd have the option basically to get like to hop on to like Medicaid if you wanted to. You could buy into that, and then I imagine it'd be heavily discounted, or like in Pete's case, it'd be free if you couldn't afford it otherwise. Yeah.
But in terms of efficiency of treating everybody in the country, making sure that you have like a healthy population, would not it make more sense to just make sure that everybody was covered?
Well, in terms of efficiency,
because
nobody.
Like the point that I was trying to get to is like, depending on how the question is asked, support for Medicare for all ranges anywhere between like 40 and 70%.
Yeah, 28 and like 72%. Yeah, I've seen that depending on how you phrase it.
Really, it can vary wildly. But so couldn't you make the argument that now is the perfect time to hop in there and actually give people something to as like a frame of reference? So you talk about different countries that have pulled off the same sort of health policy, or like I feel like now is a perfect time to like push for this thing. Is way easier now than it was 50 years ago.
Well, it depends on what you're trying to push. So the problem is we don't actually have any real like healthcare policies that we're pushing right now that would actually be good. So for instance, like in Bernie's policy, like having a healthcare system with no copay and no deductible, that's disastrous. You just can't have that. Like there's been a ton of studies that show that like overconsumption of healthcare absolutely happens if the moral hazard is present where all of your bills are being paid for by the government. It's just not a good system.
Which studies? What are you talking about?
Oh God, somebody in my chat could link it, but there was a really big one. I should know it too because I think it was published in a big journal as well. There was a really big study on this that demonstrated like massive overconsumption of healthcare if you make it free at the point of access, 100%.
Sure, maybe at the start, like people would be flooding the hospitals because they haven't seen a doctor in like 2 years.
Well, no, not just that. It's
like
not.
Why does the NHS function?
Well, the NHS, there are certain fees and they don't cover as much as Bernie's plan would. Like, I don't know if I would have to go back and look, but I don't think there's any healthcare system in the world where there's zero deductibles, zero copay, zero cost on prescriptions. Like, that's just not a thing that countries do, even countries with like universal healthcare. Like, you would never be able to bear the cost of that because your overconsumption would be crazy.
A lot of countries get close to that, though. I think a lot of countries are really close to zero. In terms of their costs.
There's no country that covers like vision, dental, and prescriptions and has zero copay, zero deductible, and has no additional like supplemental insurance. There's like no country that does this.
I think you might be right about that.
Yeah, there's no country that does this. I'm positive of that. And then generally the problem is that like when you start making it so that there's no cost at the point of service, the consumption of those services rises so much that you need to have so much more funding brought into these services as well. So the United Kingdom's educational system gets talked about a lot because for a while their education was free as fuck. But the problem is that like the quality of the education dropped so much because so many people just started going to school, and you needed like massive increases in funding and the availability of teachers and everything in order to make it actually work. And similar stuff would probably happen as well for things like health insurance. Here you go. I'm sorry. It was the Rand Health Insurance Experiment. I can link this to you. You can look this over later if you want.
In the Discord there?
Yeah, there you go. That looked at healthcare costs or whatever. That basically showed that like healthcare, for a lot of people, healthcare is a relatively elastic thing, that there are certain services that we'll consume more of if it's absolutely free and there's not even a small cost associated with it.
Okay.
One thing to keep in mind that's really important, I think, when you talk about these things is like your goal isn't to make healthcare free. Your goal is to make healthcare accessible to everybody. It's okay if you have to pay for some things, like if you've got to pay like $10 for a medication, like that's fine as long as you can afford it.
Whether you pay with a copay or whether you pay with an increase in taxes, I mean, just whatever is the most efficient way to spend your money. And right now in the United States, I think you can find a pretty clear consensus on both sides that we are not efficiently pooling our resources in order to fund a healthcare system. We are doing it in a way that is way more expensive than any other place
Yeah, that seems to be the case in terms of our spending. And then the question, I'm going to have an episode of a podcast soon where we're bringing a healthcare professional to talk about this because I'm curious. The question is just why? Why the fuck is it so expensive? Why does it cost so much more for American healthcare than in other places? People always want to point to like the profits that the health insurance companies make, but that doesn't account for the massive discrepancy in cost. Like, there are a lot of other things going on too. The compensation of our healthcare providers is very high.
The ability of the state or the federal government to negotiate with these healthcare industry, the professionals or whatever, is greatly diminished when there's not like a unified front. It's
even worse than that actually. Medicare,
or states or whatever, if you're not all on the same page. Yeah. So there's tons of reasons why.
Yeah, Medicare actually can't negotiate drug prices at all. That ability for it was just removed. I don't fucking know why, but that's really strange. But yeah. So that's like a really disastrous thing.
Pretty on brand for 2020 though.
Yeah, I guess. So, yeah. Healthcare is very, very, very complicated. Yeah, like all these big policies are, of course. But
it is, but there's just so many models across the world of people that are all pooling their resources and making it relatively easy to, get whatever medical care that you need. Like it's not crazy. Like whatever countries that you might have some kind of copay or some kind of payment, it's really not high at all compared to what we spend here in the United States.
Yeah, for sure. Accessibility in America is fucking horrible. Yeah.
Right. So if there was a time to convince people that Medicare for all would be a vastly superior system, I think now would be the perfect time to do that. Like strike while the iron's hot, while the topic is relevant. I think it will be relevant until the issue is fixed. I don't think this issue is going to go away.
Sure, you just have to be careful with how you approach it, because like if you're going for like single payer, like all the way through and through, and you're talking about banning private insurance, you're going to have to get the votes for it, and that might be hard in swing states and vulnerable districts.
It would be hard, yeah, for sure, but I think it's possible is what I'm saying. Otherwise, someone like Lyndon B. Johnson, when he was pushing civil rights through, whenever it's 63, 64, like that was not a easy political fight for him, but it happened, and like I feel like we haven't had an instance like that in the United States since, like, I guess you could argue maybe gay marriage was pretty significant in that respect.
No, because gay marriage, that we got that from the Supreme Court, kind of, right, on the backs of like
one singular issue.
Yeah, and gay marriage is easy, like. Gay people should be allowed to be married. Like, that's not a very hard thing. Whereas, like, what's the most efficient way to deliver healthcare to 330 million people or whatever? That's a really hard question, though. I mean, like...
I think it's a fight that Democrats can win, but there's, like...
The thing that people are like forgetting, the reason why I like a public option is that, one, the ACA already represents like one of the most significant departures from previous healthcare policy in the United States ever. The ACA was huge. It was insane that even the shit show that we got was passed. That was like monumental. And two, if we had like a public option set up in the United States, it's entirely possible that a public option maybe takes us to single payer in the future. That maybe the public option is so good, so many people end up switching, health insurance companies drop out, or they just can't compete with the government, or maybe all the health insurance private industries become so good that now it's fine to jump on them as well. That like a public option could theoretically either lead you to single payer or make the other health insurance companies get so competitive or good with the government option that it's okay anyway.
Can you briefly explain the difference between single payer and public option?
Oh yeah, sure. So in single payer means that the government is the sole purchaser of insurance or sole seller of insurance in the United States. So when you go to a hospital, you are always on, we'll say like Medicaid. Everybody has Medicaid, basically. Right. I think you can still have public and private hospitals, but the insurance all comes from the government. In a multi-payer system or in a public option, you have the option of buying into Medicaid, but you're not forced on it. You could maintain your private insurance with your company or your private insurance through COBRA or whatever private bullshit you have. Yeah.
Okay. Would you still be on the hook for funding the larger federal program?
We have to, yeah. You'd have to fund it through an increase in payroll taxes or something like that, yeah.
So and then most of the time it would probably be like supplemental insurance, right? Like people will probably get both.
It's possible.
In places like Canada.
I mean, there's like a million different ways that you could roll it out. You could have supplemental insurance on top of a public option. You could have a public option that covers everything, including vision and dental. Like, yeah.
Okay. All right. Mm-hmm. All right, man. Well, I think I'm gonna go eat some food because I'm pretty hungry.
Okay. Well, hey, good luck. Be careful. I love you. Stay safe. Okay. How are we doing tonight?
So what did you think?
Doing pretty good, dude.
I think we can all comfortably say that Bloomberg is not meant for the debate stage.
I was just saying earlier, I never thought that there would be a human being that could exist that would make Biden look like he has charisma, but I think I think we found the one. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like I literally saw a live murder on television. It was so beautiful.
Yeah, Bloomberg could not. Yeah, Bloomberg could not handle himself on stage. Hmm.
Do you guys have a favorite so far?
I think the big winner out of this debate is Warren. Like, I think that besides a few rebuttals to some of the things she said, she got through most of the debate unscathed, and she went really fucking hard on most of the people up there, like Klobuchar and obviously Bloomberg. So I don't know.
I'm eating. Yeah, I think like top 3 performers I'd probably say were Warren, Bernie, and my boy Pete. And then bottom 3, Biden needs to do so much better to make up for the ground that he's lost, and he just hasn't. And then I don't know. I feel like Amy was on the verge of tears tonight. She was getting bullied so hard by Pete. It was insane.
I thought she was gonna break down and cry on stage.
She said like multiple times to like Pete. She was like, "Are you calling me dumb?" Honest to God, I think that like Amy's moment when she went in to do that interview and she didn't know anything about the Mexican president. Like, what the fuck were you thinking? Like, what's wrong with you? How stupid can you be to do that? That was like a Sarah Palin moment. That was so dumb of her. Holy shit.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, I felt like the moderator was kind of biased against her. Like, she kept trying to finish her sentence, and the moderator was like they even let her get halfway through the point. I was like, bro.
I don't know. I mean, the moderators are trying to move everyone along tonight. It's hard to say if they favored or didn't favor. I'd have to go back and like count it up, but
I felt like this debate in particular was super fast paced. I don't know, like the moderators were like pushing for like as many questions as possible, it seemed.
Yeah, and they also the debates were also very bloody. Like people were going really hard, harder than they have. Like everybody was, I think.
Do you guys know what happened with people who were screaming at Biden?
I don't know.
Okay, I'm gonna Google
I don't
that.
know, what were they even saying? Could we tell? I have no idea.
I don't think you can ever tell. It's really hard to hear on those mics.
Yeah. Do we think Pete's shot at Bernie about the culinary union had any? Do you think that resonated with anybody?
I mean, I think we're going to see, like, the Medicare for All is going to be, like, a hugely divisive issue for Dems. Like, it has been and it continues to be, and it'll continue to be in the future. I guess we'll see how where unions fall in the future, like, in the upcoming states when they start campaigning to see if any other people are shying away from the Medicare for All stuff, I guess. I don't know. We'll see. But I think, like, in Nevada, I think it was, like, it looked pretty bad for Pete to be able to say, like, well, here, the culinary union in Nevada, like, has pulled their endorsement if he isn't endorsing it because of Medicare for All. I think that rhetorically was a pretty strong attack.
Yeah, I don't know. I think so far from what I've seen, like, overwhelmingly, most unions seem to side with Bernie, which makes sense because if you have Medicare for All, then you don't have, it's basically one less thing that your employer can like leverage with you, right? Like, oh, we'll pay you less, but in return you'll have this coverage. If you have Medicare for All, you don't have to worry about that.
Yeah, well, that's true, but like the idea of taking away something that you've already negotiated for can be scary. So like we'll just have to see where people like will wind up on. I guess in the upcoming states, we'll see if anybody else. I'm pretty sure right now I think Bernie does have most of the endorsement from the unions, but.
Yeah, it was definitely good rhetoric. I think Pete does a really good job of like having, I don't know. It seems like he does his fucking research before these debates because he's definitely unloading like a lot of like these heavy attacks. Like, I think like his decision to attack Bernie on the culinary shit, the union. Although I don't think it's like obviously Bernie's the union candidate. If you're pro like labor, then he's the one. But like, yeah, it is. I think it. For normies, like for the average person, I think that sticks.
Yeah. Oh God, I cringe so hard whenever Amy like repeats the name of the Mexican president now. And when she was literally like, "What do you think this is, Jeopardy? If you want to play Jeopardy, but did you know how many consulates or whatever there are in Israel? Did you it, like just like randomly rattles off like fucking? What are you doing? Oh God,
dude, I swear to God, before she said his name, she checked her notes.
100%, she fucking read up on all that. She's like, "Oh God, I have to have this memorized." What would have been
And then
really
she said it
funny
in
is
the
if
most
Pete,
white way possible. Oh my god.
yeah,
Crazy.
if Pete would have started like grilling her on like more Mexican fucking shit, that would have been funny as fuck. I feel like Amy looked so bad in that exchange, but especially when Pete knew like the committees that she was on in the Senate and everything. Like you can't. How do you not know who the Mexican president is? Like that's so embarrassing. I think
She's definitely the second biggest loser tonight. I think next to Bloomberg. I don't. She didn't get any good like any good like lines that were like or memorable one-liners or anything. It's just nothing.
Yeah, I don't think so. Which is weird because she normally has like a pretty good performance in these debates. I think that's like the one thing she had, and she really fell apart tonight. Yeah.
Yeah.
And last time I remember, she said something about how I think like we already have a person in the White House who didn't have any experience, and look at what that got us, and that like seemed to like tank Pete's numbers. But maybe that's just like bias, or that was already happening, or whatever. But you know, that was a hard hitting line. So it's kind of sad that she didn't bring it tonight.
Yeah, maybe, I don't know.
I just found it hilarious when she was like, "You know what will end sexism on the internet? A woman president."
Oh god,
Like,
dude.
Oh yeah, let's
She
go.
gave that answer. There was one more she gave that I thought was super cringe too. When they were like, "What do you think would be the best way to help DACA recipients?" And she was like, "Beating Donald Trump." Like, oh no, what are you doing, dog? One of the worst things that Amy did, you could tell how beaten down what she was at the end when she talked about like, oh, leading diversity is important, blah, blah, blah. And Pete was like, well, maybe leading like a really diverse city like South Bend, Indiana or whatever, maybe that's really important. I can't believe Amy didn't go in on that. Like, you have so many racial issues in that city, like as the mayor, like how the fuck are you going to try to stand on your record there? But she was just, I think she was just like tapped out by the end of that. Holy shit.
Yeah.
No, I'm surprised. Like, I don't know. I thought that when Bloomberg was gonna be on stage, I knew people were gonna roast him or whatever. But I'm surprised, like literally everybody jumped on him so fucking hard. It was just wild. Like I'll never get over that.
Mm-hmm.
I'm gonna love that forever.
Which actually helps, like, I think that plays well to Bernie. Since Bernie is like the front runner now, now is when you would expect all the attacks to turn to Bernie. Now that Bernie is climbing the polls, you would have expected to see every candidate like go in on him. But it seemed like most people were pretty like excited to get easy shots on Bloomberg, which kind of leaves Bernie a little bit unscathed, I think, coming out of this.
And having this be like 2 weeks before Super Tuesday, I think this is the best timing you could have ever asked for.
Yeah, maybe, yeah.
I thought Pete's line when he said that basically we're looking at like who's viable and we're looking at like Bernie and Bloomberg, which are like two extremists on opposite ends.
Mm-hmm.
And then he said that they're like not actually Dems. I think that resonated with a lot of people, but I think I fucking hate that like sort of like centrist sort of like line of attack. But
yeah, the moderates really need to coalesce around a candidate because they're fucking themselves between too many people right now, for sure.
yeah.
You've seen Game of Thrones, right?
Unfortunately, yeah.
That whole chaos as a ladder thing. I think Bernie has done really well climbing through the chaos of the primaries as all the moderates are like warring with one another. Warren kind of dropped off into nothing, and then Bernie's just had like a steady climb to the top, I think.
I think that's a good way to put it. I think that from the beginning of this thing, I always predicted that like the best way to beat Trump or like to get the nomination is to just not play the games, get your message out there, and he's done a really good job of doing that. So.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I don't know. I still have to like check the stats again because last time I checked, like it's really weird because obviously I think that most people who are like super politically involved don't think this way. Like, oh, who would your second choice be if you're a Biden supporter? You would think like, oh, that it's gonna be like overwhelmingly somebody like Pete or Klobuchar. But I remember reading something that was like 30% or around there. The second choice for Biden supporters was Sanders, and then you had similar numbers for Klobuchar and for Pete. So I think that's something to take into consideration, that even if these people like dropped off, it doesn't necessarily mean that the moderate vote is going to like
of course.
extra
Initially, Biden and Bernie had the largest shared coalition of voters. It was generally working class, less educated, poorer people that like hardcore like went for Bernie and for Biden, and then they split that. Although I think Bernie has grown his coalition out a little bit more than that. And then obviously Biden is like tanked pretty hard. Wait, are we allowed to add Bastiat in here, or do we hate him here?
No, we don't allow him. No shills
Ew.
tonight. Yeah, no, he's fine. I love Bastiat.
Okay, I'm just throwing him in because he's fucking crying and screeching about not being included in these types of things. Yeah, I don't know what else there is to say.
Let's see Bastiat's take.
That's how I always feel these debates.
What was that, you militant communists?
Yep, you got me. That's me.
Jeez Louise.
What's up, comrade?
All right. How y'all doing?
Great.
Not too bad.
Man, that was intense, huh? Holy mackerel.
Yeah, they went pretty fucking hard at each other.
Were you actually going for Bloomberg, Bastiat?
No,
I noticed you changed your title.
No, well, hey, wait a minute. I said that Bloomberg was rising up, which he certainly was, until he started to wilt immediately.
So he started to open his mouth. Jesus.
Yeah, it was just so sad. He didn't even push back when immediately challenged. So, I mean, you just imagine how he would do against Trump, because these folks are comparatively tame, right?
Mm-hmm.
It seemed like he froze up on stage and just didn't know how to respond. And it's like, you should have expected this, right? Like,
well, the problem is that he really doesn't he's not a politician at all. Like, he doesn't have the good political answers. Like, when he's on stage and he's like, America wants a manager. Like, what the fuck are you saying? Like, nobody, this doesn't resonate with anybody. Or maybe it does, and I'm totally out of touch. I don't know, but
yeah, that's too bad though, because he wrote some good checks.
Yeah.
I think they'll be drying up
so
soon,
much
though.
Money.
Yeah. Just glad they cleared quick.
Who do you like?
when I saw,
I guess I like Joe Biden.
Really?
Joe Biden seems like the person who can win, who will do the least harm, who might even do some good along the way. Pete Buttigieg, he seems cool too, but I don't know that he's gonna make it. Doesn't seem to have a lot of funding. I know Joe Biden doesn't have a lot of funding too, but he's at least got a chance now to win in South Carolina. He's got a chance to build up some momentum.
I feel like after Joe's showing in New Hampshire and Iowa, that seems so bad. And then his funding is starting to dry up. He's his lifeblood right now is the black vote. It's going to be really interesting to see what other Democrat can start to finally get African Americans to vote for them, because it seems like Biden is the only one that has done it so far. I don't understand.
Who else though among the moderates can do it otherwise though?
I mean, Warren and Bernie were the only two others that had African American support. I mean, Warren I don't think has a shot forward. Bernie kind of does, but
yeah.
I have such a hard time believing moderate and conservative black Democrat voters would vote for somebody like Pete. I guess they could. I don't know. It'll be really interesting to see those numbers roll out in the future.
Yeah. So that leaves you with Biden, unless you want Bernie.
I don't think Biden.
Maybe
I don't think
if
Biden
Bloomberg
can do
collapses,
it. Look at Biden is just coming apart.
Well, then that means nobody can, I guess, at that point, except for Bernie.
And that's kind of what it seems.
Amen, dude.
Well, now, hold on a minute though, because again, I mean, didn't Biden directly start losing people to, as soon as Bloomberg started to surge, Biden started to collapse.
Yeah, I think Biden will take a few of those voters back from Bloomberg as Bloomberg falls off, but Biden just doesn't have it. That's all I'm saying. Biden just doesn't seem to have it is the problem. He doesn't.
Well, he was awake for. I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
He was awake for the first hour tonight.
A little bit.
He was on. He took whatever Trump takes. He had some of that going for an hour.
Mm-hmm.
There was one full speaking time where he didn't say a full sentence until the very end. He kept switching every 5 words, and I was like, Biden, what are you doing?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's man, poor old Mike Bloomberg. He just folded like a wet paper bag.
Yeah, it was really interesting because I've heard Bloomberg give a lot of takes economically and shit that are actually such a good bait, and they're really defendable, obviously easily so. But he did not have it on stage.
A lot of what he said, he could have made a lot of more defensible points. He just wilted. He didn't believe in his own policy. He could have made a point. I think he would have been wrong, because ultimately stop and frisk is such a huge violation of it's not just racial, but it's also a fundamental violation of individual freedom to literally just casually talk about throwing people up against a wall. But he could have said, look, I value, he started to get into this, but I think he lost confidence when he was talking about, look, human life, right? First thing we in government protect. All right, that's my job, right? And I made some difficult decisions based on the best information we could have, and I brought down the murder rate among people in African American and Latino communities from here when I started to here when I left. If that's indeed what the data shows, and I think it does. If he does, well, if he comes out with that, I mean, at least it doesn't look as malicious and weak as it did, but he didn't feel like he had confidence in his own.
There were two really strong points rhetorically he could have loved it. One was when I came in, we looked for a lot of answers to try to solve crime. And one of them was stop and frisk, and I regret it now. It didn't work. It wasn't good. We did drop the murder rate in half, and 95% of the people that we saved were African Americans, blah, blah, blah. I'm not the only one on this stage that's made mistakes when it comes to voting or when it comes to doing policy to help crime. There's two other people on the stage, I think, that voted in favor of the crime bill. I think Biden and Bernie both did. And they wouldn't stand by that crime bill today, much the same that I wouldn't stand by stop and frisk either. There are really good answers that he could give in response, but he just doesn't have it at all. What the fuck is wrong with you? It's so weird that he would have to be trained for. He knows he's going to get hit on his record in New York. You know it. So these answers should be fucking memorized, pre-planned. You should know exactly how to respond.
I think so. And it just felt it was fun watching Elizabeth Warren cut him to shreds. But again, given that he could have, come back with some good stuff and just didn't, that's a real drag, especially because he has done a lot in terms of contributing to these climate change causes. I mean, he did have a pretty good track record in terms of making progress in New York City. He brought up life expectancy by 3 years. I mean, you can't attribute all of that probably to Mayor Bloomberg, but
raise property taxes. Yeah, he did it.
That's something. And it's better than a kick in the face.
What his answers rhetorically were so out of touch. When they were asking, do you think that you deserve to be a billionaire? And he was like, oh yeah, I worked for it. No, dog. You got to answer that there's such a better way to answer it,
a better way.
What is wrong with, there's a million different ways, I worked hard for my money and I think I should have to pay a greater percentage of it back because everybody in my company worked hard so that I could make the money that I make today. And I think, it'd be better if all billionaires had to give back. There's so many better ways to answer that. They'd be yeah, I worked for it. And then when Warren was hammering him and he was like, listen, some women just don't like the jokes I make, okay? Oh my God, what are you doing? And then my favorite line of the night, that was my second favorite line of the night. My favorite line of the night was when it was those women consensually signed that NDA. What are you saying? Why would you do this? It's I'm watching a South Park episode, where they're fucking trying to meme it up.
It could have been very, you could have said something look, these are private arrangements, and they're more complicated than you are letting on here with your ridiculous soundbite attack. These are private arrangements in which the people involved on both sides do not want the information divulged. Yeah. So for you to try and put these women on the spot and say that they should disavow these, or to try and put me on the spot and say I should end them, right, and release them to the full scrutiny of the press without giving them a chance to talk about it, is frankly ridiculous. And I think that you using the stage like this is disgusting.
Yeah, and he could have even weaseled his way out too, where he could have said,
you are a good lawyer.
If any of those women want to renegotiate their NDAs or want to have a conversation or whatever, they could definitely approach me and we could have a discussion about that for sure. But to blanket release all of them from their NDAs would be irresponsible and would subject them to a level of public harm that I don't think any of them deserve. Yeah, there's a million different ways, because to some extent NDAs can protect both parties. Now that's probably not what's happening here. It's probably probably not what's happening here. But there are so many better ways that you could phrase it. It's painful to me when I see people that are worth multiple orders of magnitude money more than me give answers that come on, you got to know that this ain't it, chief. This ain't it, chief.
I think if this really does, if he just melts from here on out, I think it will be interesting the next time somebody talks about buying an election, because to spend $300 million and to just kind of melt on stage like that with questions that you knew were coming. I mean,
you have to.
Yeah. Surprise.
How did he not get a debate coach or something? I don't know. I don't know how you can have so much money and not think, you know what, I should hire someone to help me prep for this, or I gotta get my team together to ask me potential questions.
I think it's just it's if you don't get challenged, if nobody really challenges you, I guess in your everyday life, you don't develop the reflexes for it, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know.
I mean, I watched him do a debate in New York City. I watched one of his New York City debates just to kind of get an idea for how he would do tonight, and it wasn't great. It wasn't terrible. I figured he would do a pretty weak job tonight, but I didn't think he would just melt.
Yeah, I think that this goes to show that I don't think that you can just rely on a strategy of just, pumping out a shit ton of ads. I think that like if you have no message, if you're not like backed by anything at all, any like real movement, like doesn't matter how much ads you fucking pump in the system, like you're not gonna get the fucking nomination at this point, right? Like, I don't know. Like the amount of like headlines alone that are going to be in the news cycle over the next 2 weeks because of the debate that or Bloomberg's presence on the stage tonight, it's gonna I don't think his ads are gonna mean anything.
Or maybe, I mean, we haven't seen that yet. It's possible that maybe the ad spend keeps up and it's actually okay and people don't care about the debates that much. I don't know how much people use debates to factor in like who they vote for either, so I'm not sure. The interesting thing was I think Bloomberg was the only other guy that was.
Debates.
It's the article.
Well, I'm not worried about people watching the debates. Yeah, exactly. It's the media attention, the constant news cycle over the next 2 weeks that's going to do it to him, I think. That's just my prediction. Oh,
well, since all the media is poised against Bernie and loves people like Bloomberg, that shouldn't be a problem, right?
How do you guys feel about the statement that Bloomberg is just as bad as Trump?
That's stupid as fuck. It's done by clueless people that don't understand politics or political processes or that care about anything besides their favorite pet peeve, winning in office or whatever online, so that they can show off to their friends how cool they are.
You really have to, like, for example, you have to write off climate change 100% to conclude, yeah, Trump's just as bad. I mean, the guy who thinks that it's a conspiracy by the Chinese and who, as far as I know, has never disavowed that position. Yeah, Bloomberg's just as bad. I know he's talked about climate change. He's contributed money to dealing with climate change in New York City and his role as mayor. You can only do so much as mayor deal with climate change. He tried to do some things about that. He's just as bad, though, because he's buying the election. Well, no.
Okay, so would you say he's like... because when I hear people online say like, oh, he's just as bad as Trump, it's always in regards to like the treatment of like women and minorities.
I mean, like he says he's like an old guy that says dumb shit behind closed doors that he probably shouldn't. That's probably reflective of like bad views that he has, or old white rich America views on like women and minorities, which sucks. But hopefully it doesn't seem like he has policies that would enshrine that like Trump does, like bans on like Muslim majority countries or sorry, okay.
No, absolutely. Like that, the immigration is great example of that. I mean, if you can look at what the president is doing on the border right now, and then say, well, Bloomberg though, I mean.
Yeah, Trump's comments about like women sucked and were problematic, but it wasn't just that. It was in conjunction with him saying the things that he said about women, and then saying things like, if a woman has an abortion, she should be arrested, or she should be punished for that. Or like these types of statements were like really scary, because now we have like the problematic personal life, but now we're also coupling it with potential policy decisions. Or saying things like Roe v. Wade should be left up to the states or stuff like that. That's the truly horrifying part. Yeah.
And for what little it matters, I know there's not really a lot of, these really don't get you much, I guess, politically, but Bloomberg did repeatedly try to apologize. As far as I know, President Trump has never apologized for anything.
Yeah, Trump still owns all these positions. At least Bloomberg is trying to distance himself now. How authentic or whatever, he
recognizes that even if it's all self-interest, he recognizes, okay, this is not a position it is politically profitable to hold. I'm going to distance myself from it, and express some kind of contrition. President Trump always doubles down. So
I'm just looking forward to like all the like socialist Twitter and all that shit to like stop talking about like if Bloomberg gets the nomination, how they're not gonna fucking vote, because
well, they say that about literally every candidate now, so it doesn't really matter.
I mean, true, but like fucking even Bloomberg, which I think is the worst Democratic candidate, is like still an improvement over Trump, and I don't know how these fucks don't see it. It's really fucking annoying.
Sure, but I mean,
just having a Democrat in the executive branch, the ability to like sign off legislation makes it that much like easier. Like, I don't know.
I mean, like the people are saying that like even like Pete is like a fascist somehow. So it's like, I mean, I don't know.
Yeah, I think he's a fascist.
Everybody that I don't like is a fascist. Yeah. Also, I don't know what fascism means, but I'm sure Pete is.
Yeah, I'd like to hear somebody say that and then stand by it. But yeah. So you don't have a favorite candidate right now. It sounds like that's me.
I mean, like Pete says shit that sounds okay, but like the problem is that like I'm pretty moderate politically. Like I'm much more politically woke now than I used to be. Like I used to be like a full like national polls, federal projects, and that's it, and not care about like district to district shit. But now like paying attention to that more. I've moved so much on that over the past couple of years. Like I cringe at how hard I shit on Hillary in the past, and then I see like the political strategy that I was just blind to in the past. Like really bothers me. At how naive I was. So like seeing that now, like I'm very much in favor of more moderated approaches to things because it's how you actually get things done. But like the only candidate that represents that right now, you've got Biden, who seems like his brain could fall out of his ear at any moment, and then Pete, who's very young and has a kind of questionable record, and I just don't have much to judge him by because of how young and how the gaffes he's made so far in his short political career. Like yeah, I don't know. So it's rough. I don't know. Like I don't feel like I don't have a good moderate candidate to pick out of.
Yeah, if I was picking like ideal, I guess it would be Pete. But in terms of who could win, I guess who could conceivably win, even though I grant you it seems increasingly unlikely, Joe Biden. Poor old John Delaney, he was too good for this world.
Yeah, the Delaney-acs.
Delaney-acs crying right now.
That was a risky. He tried to stake his entire campaign on climate change, right? Do you remember that?
Did he? Was that John
Yeah,
Delaney?
No, wait. I'm sorry, that was
no,
Steyer.
Steyer.
I'm an idiot, my bad.
That was Steyer,
Sorry.
yeah. What the
He
fuck
didn't
happened to
qualify
Steyer, dude?
for it, right?
Honestly.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah, they really didn't go after him too much over the billionaire stuff either. I just
True.
a little, not much, but and that weird friendship attempt with Bernie never quite worked.
Yeah, I don't know.
Got it. It's bad for Bernie's brand, man. You can't be friends with the billionaires.
One of the really funny things I've heard from some progressives when they talk about how like, oh, Bloomberg is trying to buy the election, blah blah. I'm like, I don't think you can like, we can be whatever about our politics, but I don't think it's that easy to just buy the ads. Like it does, like it didn't work for Steyer. It's crazy how many progressives were telling me that just being worth like $2 billion wasn't actually that much, and he just didn't have the money to do it. It's like he's only a billionaire, Destiny. Bloomberg is worth like $60 billion. It's like, oh, okay, so billionaire is not hot shit now. Gotcha. Okay, dudes.
No.
I thought it was kind of funny.
but there is a big difference between 2 billion and 60 billion. Like every billion is progressively like just such an incredibly high number.
Sure, but I mean, like, I think that Steyer, like, if you were proportionally, like, divvying out, like, how much ad spend there was from Bloomberg versus Steyer, like, Steyer did not have a showing, like, Steyer's showing was not proportional to the amount of ad spend. It needs more than just money. Like, it was pretty obvious based on Steyer's performance that didn't work.
He didn't spend as much as Bloomberg, but I think he still spent more than anyone else.
Yeah, it was massive.
And so it didn't get too far. And I don't know how much of his assets are liquid versus tied up in some kind of business. Like Trump is, calls himself a billionaire, but then like $3 billion of that is tied up in the value of the naming of his branding. Like a huge amount of it is tied up in his brand, and hence the best attack on Trump that now is unlikely to make it into the general election. How do you feel about two billionaires going into each other in an election? And then Mike Bloomberg says, "Who's the other billionaire?"
Yeah. When someone in chat just said like Steyer spent like 0.01% of the amount Bloomberg spent. I'm pretty sure Steyer spent, but when he dropped out, I think it was like about half. I think Steyer had spent about half as much as Bloomberg when I'd looked at it.
He spent $150 million.
Yeah, I think so, and I think Bloomberg had spent up to like $250 million at that point, or somewhere around there. But like, yeah, people acting like Steyer only spent like $5 million. You have no idea what the fuck you're talking about. Like you're totally clueless. Like I'm looking at Checkered Tuck. Sorry, I'm calling him out. Okay, yeah.
Wow, yeah. Fox Business said he spent at least he spent about 200 million. Steyer spent about 200 million.
Yep.
And Bloomberg spent about 400 million.
Yeah. So it's not like Steyer spent nothing compared to Bloomberg. Like Bloomberg spent about twice as much, but Steyer had nothing in the polls. Like the idea that Steyer spent 0.001% is that's not even remotely true.
What is it like to move that much money around to buy ads?
Just waste it.
That feels like such a. Oh my god! I mean, at that point, damn, you got that kind of money. I mean, why bother running for office when you could just, start your own city and just run it like your own little fiefdom?
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know. I don't think I'm not sure. I feel like when you're in that position of so much wealth and money, it's like, okay, what do you do next?
Yeah.
Like,
Okay, dude, president, let's go, man.
I know, there's no substitute for the big
Well, people meme, right? It's about power and influence, not necessarily wealth at that point.
Yeah, probably to some extent.
And I feel like it's a fair criticism to be like, yeah, no, it is worrying that somebody who has so much money can theoretically influence an election.
Well, but I don't think it's true.
Well, even though you guys are like right up to a certain extent that, what is it? That I guess you need more than just, from what we've seen right now, more than just money to win an election, right? Like so much money has been being pumped into ads, for example, Satyr, yet he didn't really rise in the polls. I think there is still something to be said that you, theoretically can influence like certain towns, precincts, etc., etc., etc. I don't know. I have mixed feelings about it. Like, yeah, right now it really didn't end up as 2 billionaires in the finals, blah 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 blah. But I mean, when you have so much money, you can just keep pumping ads and ads and ads and ads. And to say that has no influence on the American people or very little, I'm kind of skeptical of that claim.
Well, I mean,
I feel like that's so dependent on the messaging.
Well, and it feels like Bloomberg.
Exactly.
Bloomberg is also riding on the fact that he was like mayor of New York for 3 terms, and then he's got like the name recognition from his businesses as well. I think that's been probably about as important as his ad spend. I don't know. We just compare him to somebody like Steyer, who just didn't move the needle on anything at all. I think Steyer's presence in like 1 state.
Yeah.
Nevada
I don't know
or whatever.
If anyone knows much about him, but although is Mike Bloomberg, was he like a household name?
I mean, everybody knows like Bloomberg, right? Everybody just knows the name.
Yes. I mean,
Right.
I'm tempted to say so because the news site and all that, but I mean, if he had somebody in Gold Streams in the chat said if Bloomberg had shown anything halfway resembling charisma tonight, he might have had a real shot. I think that's true.
Maybe, yeah.
He opened the door with the money. If he had had some stage presence enough to at least hold his own. Who knows? Like you said, maybe the polls won't move. I mean, all the talk I was dropping about him melting is based on watching betting markets sink during the debate.
Yeah, for sure.
For Mike Bloomberg.
Mm-hmm.
What did they drop, like 11% or something like that? Or?
Yeah. Although, in terms of Democrats who rose the most, it was Elizabeth Warren and then Pete Buttigieg. And then in terms of who won the most on the national, the general election score, it was...
Yep. By like what, 1% or something?
Yeah,
like that, right?
Little ticks upward. I mean, again, it's not a poll, but it's what it is. So, interesting stuff.
I mean, how do you guys feel about the DNC like removing the fundraising requirement for Bloomberg to participate? Do you think that was like
my understanding is
logical,
that
fair?
my understanding is that Bernie and Warren actually pushed their camps were actually pushing for that to happen because the idea was Bloomberg was basically going unopposed in all of these areas and didn't have to show for anything or answer to anything because all they got were his ads, and that they actually wanted him on that debate stage because it would show how vulnerable of a candidate he was my understanding of that.
Well, work in their favor if that was the case.
Yeah.
Intense stuff. How do you guys feel about the brokered convention? You think Bernie will win a brokered convention?
No. Well, if he
When's the
gains
next debate?
if he gains significantly more popularity and manages to, if he can get a majority of the delegates, I don't know if he can do that, but if he can, I think he gets a brokered convention. He has to. But if he goes in with a plurality, if like him and Warren together don't even have a majority, I think it goes to like either like a Biden or a Pete. So
Yeah.
it feels like what happened.
Yeah, I think you're right. I guess if he had enough votes, then it wouldn't be brokered. And then maybe if Elizabeth Warren, then if they together could get over 50. But yeah,
Is it? Do you need just a simple majority to win, or is it a higher number?
I don't know. Actually, I think it's a simple majority, but let's check it out.
Hold on, I have to make sure because I'm about to IP ban like 7 people in my chat if it's not a simple majority.
Okay, let's see. A majority of the pledged delegates on the first ballot, 1,991 pledged delegates, according to Ballotpedia.
Okay, and that's just like 50% plus 1 or whatever?
Yes, the DNC is calculating a majority as 50% plus 1 delegate.
Yeah, okay.
If the convention is contested and goes to a second ballot or more, automatic delegates will be able to vote, and a candidate must receive majority support from all delegates, more than 2,375 votes, because that includes those signatures. Interesting stuff. Yeah, I feel like I wonder if Bernie were to win, would that not, as somebody who's run against the establishment and all that, would that not come, especially maybe with Trump as an example, would that not come at great risk to all the people who are currently, I guess, leading figures in the party?
I think it would shift everything left. I think that, I mean, theoretically, something similar to Trump would happen, right? I mean, that's what I'm thinking of, but who knows? Like,
well, I know a lot of the Republicans thought, I think, that they could, and where we heard this argument before, right? We can control him. He'll moderate. Didn't happen.
Yeah, I think that I think that right now the Democratic Party is very fractured, and I feel like we could have two potentially bad results no matter what happens. That like if a moderate gets in, like Bernie fans have already shown that they're like not willing to support anybody besides Bernie. And then if Bernie gets in, I don't know if moderates will feel like Bernie like represents them, especially when it comes to like communities of color, like the African American community specifically. So it feels like really split right now in terms of maybe that changes going forward. Maybe people like coalesce around a certain candidate. Huh?
I don't know how I feel about that argument because, like, if you're a moderate, who do you think is more extreme, Donald Trump or Bernie Sanders?
Well, it's not just about picking the lesser of two evils. It's the idea that, like, people don't really like that idea, so they're just not, like, incentivized to go out and vote that much. You just don't get, like, a big voter turnout, and then Trump wins. Like, bad voter turnout on the Democrat side, like, gives Trump the election pretty easily.
Well, doesn't it seem like Bernie increases voter turnout,
Nope.
especially like for young people?
Nope, hasn't happened at all yet in Iowa or New Hampshire. Maybe that changes for other states going forward, but that was one of the big takeaways from, I think it was Iowa, that he didn't actually bring out any young voters at all. It was about the same proportion you saw like in prior elections. Maybe that was different in New Hampshire, but I think I only saw the numbers for Iowa on that. Or actually, it shrunk as a total percentage of people who voted in Iowa. Maybe that was different on New Hampshire though. I'd have to look. I don't remember if I heard anything different for New Hampshire.
There's something I was gonna say about that also. And I mean, like, at least when it comes to, like, black voter turnout, when it comes to any other candidate but Joe Biden, like, Bernie also polls extremely well.
No, he pulls a little bit ahead, but not really extremely well. Nobody really touches Biden's numbers. Bernie is either...
Oh, yeah, Biden is, like, 40, but when I looked at Bernie, it was, like, 20 or something, and then compared to everybody else, it's, like,
I think
10 or less.
Warren and Bernie were pretty similar, around the 15%. I'd have to go and pull out what the recent numbers are, but I don't think Bernie was up to 20, not on. The only way you get Bernie to like really high like minority vote is usually when you start roping in Hispanics. That's why usually when people talk about Bernie supports, they always say supports with minority voters, never with African American voters. But then Hispanics also skew very, very, very young. So it's hard to know like how much of that like Hispanic voter turnout would actually help Bernie in the primaries or in an election, because younger people don't tend to vote.
How much do you think that would change if Biden drops out and endorses Bernie, if that was to happen?
I don't think that's ever gonna happen.
I'm not entirely sure. I don't know.
After Super Tuesday, if he doesn't do too well, do you think he wouldn't drop out?
I mean, he might.
no,
I don't know if he'd
all
drop
the
out, but
way.
I don't know if he'd endorse Bernie.
Yeah, I know that is the question, right? Who would he endorse?
I think he'd endorse
Probably Pete, right? Yeah.
Maybe, or maybe Amy. I don't know.
I expect
Maybe I
Amy to
just
drop
have
out tomorrow.
Maybe I got an irrational dislike for her, but when she drops those anecdotes, and are you calling me dumb?
Oh God, I felt like that was
Amy.
so bad. I hate Amy's stories so much. Oh my God.
Yeah, I just, I know the stapler memes, and but just purely based on what I've seen, it just feels like this very cringy anecdotes back with, that kind of fill in the gaps between nothing.
I mean, like the
and then
anecdotes in and of
Pete
themselves
Buttigieg-
aren't bad. It's just the way that she tells the stories is always so.
I mean, I guess a few anecdotes. I know that I kind of, I know there are a lot of people like them. I am often frustrated by them, but they always feel so forced to me. But,
Yeah.
but the, there's nothing in between them. There's not much of a plan, and there's just a whole lot of defensiveness. Like when Pete talked about her voting record, she like seemed to start shaking with rage and indignation over it.
Yeah.
Takes a lot.
Like, just what are you gonna do when Trump challenges you then?
Yeah.
So that's what we got.
Okay, this sounds really stupid. How do you guys open incognito mode in Google Chrome?
If you open a
you hit
window,
the-
you can push Control-Shift-N, I think does it.
Yeah.
Or you can right-click on the bottom taskbar and do it, or you can right-click on any link and then open incognito.
Okay, thank you. It just, I was trying to search for articles and then I got the dumb, you have to pay, whatever. And it was annoying.
Yeah.
So why don't you like Bernie Bastiat? Or I don't know how you feel
Too
about it.
extreme.
But
Too
okay,
extreme. He's going to normalize a lot of bad ideas, and frankly, the reason that I can countenance voting for him is because I know that none of his stuff will get through Congress, or through courts, or through both. If I really thought his platform had a real chance of going forward, I would be a lot more skeptical. Like if I really thought he could get national rent control and impoverish a bunch of people in the process, if I really thought he could start clamping down on trade even more than Trump wants to, if I really thought that he could wipe out nuclear power and natural gas, and I guess
that's a big one for
like
me.
if I really thought he could do all of that, then I probably would vote for him. But on the other hand, I think that he will have the ability to reverse Trump's, with the Congress, even if the Congress are Democrats. I don't think they countenance most of what he wants to do. And if he has power with a divided Congress and with Trump's conservative courts, he can roll back the president's bad executive actions, clean up the mess he's left behind on immigration, and release people, reunite families, and all that. And maybe hopefully move the needle forward in a productive way on healthcare without nationalizing it. So, but yeah, if I thought he had a real chance of getting his projects, in place, I wouldn't vote for him.
I think the two biggest things that are going to hurt, or that at least make me look at Bernie and question why the fuck he has this position, is his stance on nuclear energy and other like other memes. Like I think he's against like geoengineering and like other shit too, which is like really weird. And then his stance on guns, which is like super cringe.
I think Bernie has the best general stance on guns. The idea of being able to sue a gun manufacturer is you're basically banning firearms in the United States. That's like such an insanely controversial position that so many Democrats, Hillary and Biden included, like take on. I think it's a really bad policy. I think Bernie has one of the best kind of like central stances on firearms. And that
What is it? I really don't know much
Do you
about
support like an assault rifle ban?
no, I think it's dumb.
Well, yeah, that's like I wish he wouldn't either, but he does. I don't like that.
Oh,
kind
does
of
he? I mean, that's not the
Yeah.
big thing though. Like the big thing is like I know there are a lot of people that want to like make it like legal to sue like firearm manufacturers, which is like a big no-no.
I just don't know what the claim is at that point. I don't know what the
Well,
claim
the idea is that if they like, it's only if they gave it to them with knowledge that they had like a criminal past, or like that they shouldn't have had access to the firearm in the first place, right? Like only then could you take legal action.
like if you didn't
Like if they flub the
Oh wait, gun manufacturers don't do background checks.
yeah,
right?
I thought they don't sell maybe some of them sell, well, some of them probably sell directly to the public, I guess, but I don't know. No. I just would be
Yeah.
curious what the cause of action that they would bring up is, because if it's like, well, guns are, I mean, I guess maybe it's something analogous to the tobacco suits, but I mean, those involved basically a lot of lying from the cigarette companies about the harm of their product. I don't know that there's something like that with guns. I don't know if there's an analogy there.
Oh yeah, because we're talking about Yeah, no, it doesn't make any sense. Not the manufacturers.
Yeah. That's
well, maybe to prevent manufacturers like from selling to stores that they
Well, but that's the whole point. What's going to happen is if I can sue, like they're trying to make it so that like if somebody gets like killed by a gun, I can sue the manufacturer, like just for like a mass murder or something. Like at that point, like what you would never sell firearms anymore in the U.S. Like it's just too risky to do so. Like it's politically, that's a pretty extreme position to take.
And I would
Wasn't that
think
kind of like
even
how
you
didn't
have that
California try to require that like the firing pin on every gun like stamps the bullet or something, and it like effectively like criminalized like the manufacturing of guns in California? Like
Sounds like
didn't
a
that
California thing to do.
happen? Yeah,
Hmm.
just people having no idea about guns making gun regulations. Feels good.
Let's see. Apparently, one of the suits against a gun manufacturer after Sandy Hook was based on their marketing practices. And they said the claim was that their marketing practices promoted and encouraged violent criminal behavior. So I guess that's that still seems pretty thin. I don't know if she could make that claim very successfully, but hey.
I just want to say something quickly about young voter turnout when it comes to Sanders. I just like read about it like when it came to Iowa, and even though like the raw number was less in terms of like proportion, it was like a higher younger voting percentage than 2008 and 2016.
Well, that's worse then, isn't it? Because he dissuaded that you could use that to say that everybody that wasn't young was dissuaded from turning out at that point, right?
Well, you could make an argument that Democrats in general were less persuaded to go out and vote this time. But if we're talking about strictly like young voters, like whether like if more young voters like proportionally came out this time than other times, then the answer would be yes.
Yeah, I feel like if
Sure,
I'd be curious if you can link me that too. I'm curious to see that. But like, yeah, if there are like less absolute voters too, that's pretty bad.
I don't think that argument supports Bernie though. I think that actually makes it worse, if anything. Like, okay, yeah, we had more young people turn out, but
Destiny,
like less people
I really
in general.
enjoy
like
your
that.
stream, and I want to thank you.
Usually
from
not
the
how we win
toxic
elections. It's
CX
off just the
losers
young
group.
vote, right?
Oh,
think
no,
Trump is the
absolutely
greatest
not.
president of all time.
But I mean, like the point that like was trying to be made here is that you can't like completely attribute the amount of people who came to vote this time on Bernie Sanders in general, right? Like you do that on like the general faith of the party, the general candidates, etc., etc.
Well, but Bernie is one of the candidates, right?
Yeah, Bernie is one of the candidates. But the point I'm trying to like say here is that it's not like how do you call it? It's like because Bernie was there, less people came and voted. Does that make sense?
Well, but if Bernie's whole thing is that he's going to increase turnout, and then less young people show up to vote for him than they did last time, that seems kind of bad, no?
Well, no. If proportionally you have more people that are younger turnout than previous years.
Well, but if it's proportionally higher because everybody else just doesn't bother to vote, is that really good?
Yeah, no, then that's a problem for the Democratic Party as a whole. I agree with you on that. I just thought it was an interesting article. I sent it to you guys.
I just think Bernie voters need to like give up on like the states that we like Iowa and New Hampshire, and just look forward, right? Like we can take the victory that we got.
Well, Iowa and New Hampshire were both really good for Bernie, I think. Like Bernie won. Am I booming? Bernie won
Well, yeah,
New
but
Hampshire.
like,
Yeah,
I don't know, like fixating on like the turnout and like, well,
sure.
actually more young people. It's just like, okay, but like, yeah, we got the victory we needed for now, so let's just take it, you know.
So I heard you got a problem with the way that Pete dresses when he's engaged in voter outreach. Not a fan of the suit and tie.
You're talking to me?
Yeah. No.
What did I? Oh, when he
I
was
heard
with the
you
two
didn't
black
like
guys on the
classy
bridge or
outfit.
whatever, and he was like
Yeah.
dressed in the fucking suit. Yeah.
Yeah. What do you think he should? What do you think he should wear? I don't know what else a presidential candidate would. What do you do when you're running for president?
Wife beater and gym shorts.
Hell yeah! There you go. Get my M&M attire out.
Mackenzie Pete rolling out with his M&M attire. Hey, fellow youth. How are you doing? How are y'all doing up in here? Crazy stuff. Well, that was the most fun debate to watch.
Sure. What are you doing? You're gonna get killed by. Oh my god! Good job, Zach.
So I heard you got a panel talk about healthcare coming up.
Oh no, I'm grabbing hopefully a UCLA professor who's got some shit. He's been on stand a few times to talk. I want to finally start my fucking podcast. I think the first episode is gonna be on fucking healthcare. That's what I want to do. Oh yeah. So that should be fun.
I know.
You were asking for question suggestions. You should ask if, because I hear the talking point a lot about how hospitals are going to lose money or that there's going to be like a shortage of doctors. You should ask that question. That'd be a good one.
Yeah. Yeah, the shortage of doctors, the money saved is very suspect. Like, I don't know, there's a lot of weird questions about single-payer systems, like in terms of like if it would actually save money or if it would decrease the funding to hospitals because American doctors make so much. Does that need to go down? Like, I don't know, there's a lot of weird stuff around that.
That was Dan's point? Shut up. Dan stole that point from me, alright? Fuck off.
Oh, man. Yeah. Yeah, you know, I have to say, there does seem to be a whole lot more excitement among the Trump crowd when I occasionally get a glimpse into that world. They just seem so excited about the election, about their guy. It's crazy.
I don't know. I think. Well, okay. I honestly like hold a position. I don't think anybody but Bernie can beat Trump. Do you guys feel like super differently about that?
I don't think there's any guarantee that anybody could beat Trump. I think right now Biden still scores the highest in the head-to-head against Trump, but I don't know. It's hard to say. Rhetorically, I think Bernie stacks up pretty well against him. I mean, Pete could do it too, depending on how hard he wants to go. Biden, if he's not having like his dementia moments, he could do it. I mean, I don't know. Just there's so many variables. It's hard to say.
Well, it was fun chatting with all of you about this. I really enjoyed it. It was fun to debrief after that too. You could feel the tension. You cut the tension with a knife or with a misplaced staple gun, perhaps.
Wait, what does the staple gun mean? Can someone explain that to me?
Oh, apparently she threw a stapler at one of her employees.
Who did? Amy?
Yeah, Amy Klobuchar.
Nice.
Yeah, it's kind of her thing is, I think one of her staffers, or some of them rather, accused her of creating a very hostile work environment, and that was one of the examples. So.
Okay.
So,
Nothing about that has come out on the debate stage, which I'm really surprised. I've been thinking that would come out for months now, but
yeah, I guess it just kind of small fish. What do you hope to gain out of it, right? But that would be a fun meeting, like if Pete was just like, "Well, hold on there, you don't need to throw a stapler at me or anything, all right?" It's probably not happening. But he's too much the professional. Did you see he was speaking Norwegian to somebody the other day, and then somebody on Twitter was like, "He doesn't speak good enough Norwegian. Okay, he's a fraud. He's a fake." Jeez. Okay. All right.
I don't know. I feel like from the little bits of Spanish that I've heard him speak, maybe it's just me being too judgmental because I know Spanish that I just a little. It was when Pedro O'Rourke kept trying to speak Spanish on stage, and I was like, please just stop.
How did he do tonight? He did try and sneak some in tonight. Well, I guess it wasn't a sneak.
It was
I thought we were over that.
Able to make a strong statement. I just sometimes I feel like it's just yes, obviously, you're on a big stage, you're gonna want to pander to people, duh. But I don't know. I feel like most Hispanic people, when they hear that, they're just like, bad accent. Why are you doing this?
Do you think it would be better to just not really try, if you are, I guess, not Hispanic, I know we both know English, or do you think there's something to be gained? I mean, there are people out there who speak Spanish.
I think you do a lot better if you want to pander to Hispanic or Latin audiences by making some sort of cultural reference or trying to insert a cultural reference more.
True.
I think if you somehow found a way to do that, people would be like, oh my god, they know this person, or they talked about this person, or they talked about this dish. What?
Basically the opposite of what Amy did.
Well, I don't know. I've seen some support for the notion that apparently it's much better to try as a form of outreach, even if you're doing it, even if you're not doing it great. But I don't know. I don't know how I'd feel. I mean, I don't have the cultural background to respond like that. It always seems to me a little bit forced, but I don't know how I would feel if I spoke Spanish and I heard that.
Well, I'm sure there's a little abuelita out there who only speaks Spanish and maybe their eyes light up when they hear Spanish by all these American candidates. But I mean, I think for Hispanics who know English and Spanish, when they hear that, that sentence or phrase, it just comes off as such obvious, pandering and superficial pandering also. I could put that in Google fucking Translate, basically.
Yeah.
Good to know. All right, y'all. Well, it was fun talking with all of you, and hey, I hope you have a good night. Looking forward to doing it again soon.
Yeah.
Yeah, you
Have
too.
fun.
Bye.
Take care.
All right, I'm gonna go to bed soon too, because it's almost 10 o'clock for me. Rip on, guys.
Later, man.
Talk to you later, alligators.
Yeah.
Bye.
Bye. I didn't say it's the men's fault. I said it's a little bit more complicated, and it's trying to blame, oh, it's the women, oh, it's the men, blah, blah, blah. That either side, that's a really one-dimensional way of looking at it.